In today's video, I'm going to answer a question that might seem surprising. Why are cold countries richer than hot countries? You might think that this question is absurd. After all, who wouldn't prefer living in a warm and sunny place than a cold and dark one? Well, it turns out that there is a strong correlation between the average temperature of a country and its GDP per capita, which is a measure of how much income each person earns in a year. In general, the colder the country, the richer it is. But why is this the case? Is it just a coincidence, or is there a causal relationship between climate and wealth? And what about the exceptions to this rule, such as Singapore, Qatar, Australia, and Finland? How do they fit into the picture? In this video, I'm going to explore these questions and more. I'm going to explain the theory that colder countries are richer than hotter countries based on factors such as production efficiency, resource allocation, disease burden, human capital, and institutional quality. I'm also going to analyze the data on GDP per capita and temperature across different countries and regions and see how they correlate. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to define what we mean by cold and hot countries. For this video, I'm going to use the average annual temperature of each country as a proxy for its climate. This is not a perfect measure, as it does not account for other factors such as humidity, precipitation, altitude, and seasonality. But it is a simple and convenient way to compare different countries based on their climate. According to the World Bank data for 2019, the average annual temperature of the world was 14.7 degrees Celsius. The coldest country in the world was Greenland, with an average temperature of -9.7 degrees Celsius. The hottest country in the world was Djibouti, with an average temperature of 28.6 degrees Celsius. Now let's look at the GDP per capita of each country. According to the World Bank data for 2019, the average GDP per capita of the world was $11,429. The richest country in the world was Luxembourg, with a GDP per capita of $114,705. And the poorest country in the world was Burundi, with a GDP per capita of $261. If we plot these two variables on a scatter plot, we can see a clear negative relationship between them. That means that as the temperature increases, the GDP per capita decreases. As you can see that most of the data points are clustered around a downward sloping line. This line is called a regression line, and it shows us how much one variable changes when another variable changes by 1 unit. In this case, the regression line tells us that for every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, the GDP per capita decreases by $762. This is a very strong correlation, but it does not necessarily imply causation. Correlation means that two variables move together in a consistent way. Causation means that one variable directly affects another variable. To establish causation, we need to have a plausible mechanism or explanation for why one variable causes another variable. So what are some possible explanations for why colder countries are richer than hotter countries? Well, there are many theories and hypotheses that have been proposed by economists and geographers over the years. Some of them are more convincing than others, but none of them can fully account for all the variations and complexities of reality. Here are some of the most common ones. Production efficiency. This theory argues that colder climates allow for more efficient production because they reduce heat stress on workers and machines. Heat stress can lower productivity by causing fatigue, dehydration, illness, and errors. It can also damage equipment and infrastructure by causing overheating, corrosion, and wear and tear. Colder climates also reduce cooling costs for buildings and vehicles. As a result, colder countries can produce more goods and services with less resources than hotter countries. Resource allocation. This theory argues that colder climates force people to allocate more resources to survival than consumption or leisure. Survival requires investing in food production, clothing, shelter, heating, healthcare, and education. These investments create positive spillovers for economic development, such as technological innovation, human capital accumulation, and institutional quality. Hotter climates, on the other hand, allow people to allocate more resources to consumption or leisure, which have less positive spillovers for economic development. Disease burden. This theory argues that hotter climates are more conducive to the spread of infectious diseases than colder climates. Infectious diseases can lower economic development by reducing life expectancy, labor force participation, human capital formation, and savings. They can also increase healthcare costs, social unrest, and political instability. Colder climates, on the other hand, are less conducive to the spread of infectious diseases and therefore have less negative impacts on economic development. Human capital. This theory argues that colder climates favor higher levels of human capital than hotter climates. Human capital refers to the skills, knowledge, and abilities of people that contribute to economic production. Colder climates may favor higher levels of human capital by stimulating cognitive development, encouraging education and learning, and promoting social cooperation and trust. Hotter climates may hinder higher levels of human capital by impairing cognitive development, discouraging education and learning, and undermining social cooperation and trust. Institutional quality. This theory argues that colder climates foster better institutions than hotter climates. Institutions refer to the rules, norms, and organizations that shape human behavior and interactions. Better institutions are those that promote economic efficiency, political stability, social justice, and environmental sustainability. Colder climates may foster better institutions by creating a scarcity mindset, a long-term orientation, a collective action problem, and a common enemy. Hotter climates may hinder better institutions by creating an abundance mindset, a short-term orientation, a free rider problem, and a fragmented society. These are some of the main theories that try to explain why colder countries are richer than hotter countries. Of course, these theories are not mutually exclusive or exhaustive. They may interact with each other in complex ways, and they may be influenced by other factors that are not related to climate. For example, natural resource wealth, trade openness, cultural diversity, historical legacy, and geographical location may also affect the economic development of different countries. But even if we accept these theories as valid explanations for why colder countries are richer than hotter countries in general, we still need to account for the outliers and the exceptions to this rule. There are some countries that have very high or very low GDP per capita despite having very hot or very cold climates. How do we explain these anomalies? Let's look at some examples of these outliers and see what makes them different from the rest. One of the most obvious outliers is Singapore. Singapore is a very hot country with an average temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. But it is also a very rich country with a GDP per capita of $65,233. How did Singapore achieve this remarkable feat? Well, Singapore is a city-state that has a very small land area and population. It has no natural resources and no agricultural sector. It relies heavily on trade and services as its main sources of income. It has also invested heavily in education, technology, infrastructure, and governance. It has developed a highly skilled workforce, a diversified economy, a competitive business environment, and a stable political system. It has also leveraged its strategic location as a hub for regional and global trade. Singapore is an example of how a hot country can overcome its climatic disadvantages by pursuing smart policies and strategies that enhance its comparative advantages. Another outlier is Qatar. Qatar is also a very hot country with an average temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. But it is also a very rich country with a GDP per capita of $69,687. How did Qatar achieve this impressive feat? Well, Qatar is a small country that has a very large endowment of natural gas. It has the third largest proven reserves of natural gas in the world after Russia and Iran. It is also the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. It has used its natural gas wealth to finance its economic development and diversification. It has also invested in education, healthcare, infrastructure, and sports. Qatar is an example of how a hot country can exploit its natural resource wealth to boost its economic development and diversification. A third outlier is Australia. Australia is a relatively hot country with an average temperature of 21 degrees Celsius. But it is also a relatively rich country with a GDP per capita of $55,060. How did Australia achieve this decent feat? Well, Australia is a large country that has a diverse range of climates and ecosystems. It has a rich endowment of natural resources, such as coal, iron ore, gold, uranium, and natural gas. It has a strong agricultural sector, producing wheat, wool, beef, and dairy products. It has also developed a sophisticated service sector, especially in finance, tourism, education, and healthcare. It has a high-quality education system, a multicultural society, a democratic political system, and a close alliance with the United States. Australia is an example of how a hot country can leverage its natural resource wealth and its human capital to achieve a balanced and resilient economy. A fourth outlier is Finland. Finland is a very cold country with an average temperature of 3 degrees Celsius. But it is also a very rich country with a GDP per capita of $48,783. How did Finland achieve this admirable feat? Well, Finland is a small country that has a very homogeneous and educated population. It has a strong tradition of innovation and entrepreneurship, especially in information technology, telecommunications, gaming, and biotechnology. It has also built a comprehensive welfare state that provides universal health care, education, social security, and child care. It has a high level of social trust, civic engagement, gender equality, and environmental sustainability. It has also maintained good relations with its neighbors, especially Russia and the European Union. Finland is an example of how a cold country can harness its human capital and its social capital to create a competitive and inclusive economy. These are some of the outliers that challenge the theory that colder countries are richer than hotter countries. They show us that climate is not destiny, and that other factors can play a more important role in determining the economic development of different countries. But even if we acknowledge these outliers and these other factors, we still cannot ignore the historical and cultural factors that influence the economic trajectories of colder and hotter countries. These factors are often overlooked or underestimated by the theories that focus on climate alone. One of these historical factors is the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution was the transition from hunting and gathering to farming and domestication of animals. It started around 10,000 years ago in different regions of the world independently. It allowed people to produce more food than they could consume, which led to population growth, surplus accumulation, trade expansion, social stratification, and political organization. The agricultural revolution was more successful in colder regions than in hotter regions for several reasons. First, colder regions had more suitable crops and animals for domestication than hotter regions. Crops such as wheat, barley, rice, and potatoes were more productive and nutritious than crops such as millet, sorghum, cassava, and yams. Animals such as cows, sheep, pigs, horses, and chickens were more useful and adaptable than animals such as camels, llamas, zebras, ostriches. Thanks for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe to Wi-Fi Bread, the channel for economics and finance. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.